The distress signal, the crystal spires of Krelia, shimmered under bombardment, their once beautiful surfaces cracking like glass under pressure. The planet's 3 moons hung in the violet sky, bearing witness to what might be the final hours of a civilization that had flourished for 10,000 years. Inside the Planetary Defense Command Center, Ambassador Theron pressed his 6-fingered hands against the communication console, his pale blue skin flickering with bioluminescent patterns of distress. The Void Reapers had arrived 7 days ago. Their black ships blotted out entire sections of space, moving with an otherworldly grace that defied conventional physics. They didn't negotiate. They didn't demand surrender. They simply consumed, stripping worlds of all organic matter to fuel their endless expansion across the galaxy. Krelia was just their latest target, and the planet's shields were failing. "Ambassador, we've lost the Northern Hemisphere generators," reported Commander Velix, his usually melodious voice strained with exhaustion. The Krelians were a peaceful species, evolved from aquatic ancestors who valued harmony and intellectual pursuits. War was an alien concept they'd been forced to learn too late. Estimated time until complete shield failure is 4 hours. Theron's bioluminescent patches pulsed faster, a sign of his racing thoughts. He had already sent distress signals to every major power in the Galactic Confederation. The Centauri Republic, with their vast armadas, had politely declined, citing resource allocation issues. The Marteki Collective claimed their fleets were engaged elsewhere. Even the supposedly noble Celestial Alliance had offered only thoughts and prayers. Nothing more. They were all afraid. The Void Reapers had destroyed 17 systems in the past year, and no force in the galaxy had successfully stopped them. Why risk their own worlds for the Krelians? It was cold logic, the kind that dominated galactic politics. "Send another broadcast," Theron commanded, his voice carrying the weight of desperation. "All frequencies, all languages. Someone must answer." The communications specialist, a young Krelian named Lyra, worked her console with trembling fingers. The message went out across subspace, a plea they would reach the farthest corners of known space. It was their last hope, thrown into the cosmic void like a message in a bottle cast into an endless ocean. 300 light-years away, aboard the human exploration vessel UE's Perseverance, Captain Sarah Chun was reviewing star charts when the distress signal arrived. The bridge crew fell silent as the Universal Translator processed the message, filling the command center with Theron's desperate plea. Sarah stood from her captain's chair, her dark eyes scanning the tactical display that materialized before her. "Captain, the signal originates from the Krelian system," reported Lieutenant Commander Jake Torres, the ship's navigation officer. "According to our database, they're a peaceful species, members of the Galactic Confederation." "And these Void Reapers?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Humanity had been monitoring galactic communications since making first contact 2 years ago. They knew about the threat, had studied every available piece of data about these mysterious aggressors. "Extremely hostile, Captain. They've destroyed every world they've encountered. No survivors, no negotiations." Torres paused, his expression grim. "The Confederation powers consider them unstoppable." Sarah smiled, expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. Humans knew something about facing the unstoppable. They came from Earth, a world the galaxy classified as a Class 12 death world. Everything on Earth had tried to kill humans at some point. Diseases, predators, natural disasters, even other humans. They had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and nuclear war. They had earned their place among the stars through sheer stubborn refusal to die. "How many ships do we have in range?" she asked, already knowing this decision would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. 47 vessels within rapid response distance, Captain," mostly exploration and colony ships. But Torres hesitated. They all have military-grade equipment. You know Earth's policy about sending ships into the unknown unarmed. Indeed, she did. Every human vessel was equipped for war, even those intended for peaceful purposes. It was a habit born from millennia of survival on a hostile world. Where other species built specialized warships, humans simply assumed every ship might need to fight for its life. Send a priority message to all human vessels in the sector, Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made impossible decisions before. Tell them Corellia needs our help. Tell them the galaxy thinks it's impossible. And remind them that humans specialize in the impossible. The response was immediate and unanimous. Within minutes, 47 confirmations arrived. Mining ships reported dumping their cargo to make room for weapons. Colony vessels began fabbing ammunition in their industrial bays. Science ships started converting their sensor arrays into targeting systems. The humans were coming. Back on Corellia, Theron had nearly given up hope when Lyra suddenly straightened at her station. Ambassador, we're receiving a response. It's from a species calling themselves humans. Theron accessed his memory banks, searching for information. Humans, a recently discovered species from the galactic rim. Their homeworld was classified as uninhabitable by civilized standards. The few reports about them suggested they were primitive, violent, and utterly unpredictable. Not exactly the saviors he'd hoped for. The message was brief. Corellia, this is Captain Shun of Earth's United Expeditionary Force. Hold your position. Help is coming. ETA 3 hours. Commander Velix looked skeptical. 3 hours? Even at maximum. Hyperdrive. That's barely possible. And what can one primitive species do against the Void Reapers? Before Theron could respond, proximity alarms began screaming. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace directly inside the system's gravity well, a maneuver considered suicidal by every spacefaring species. One after another, human vessels appeared, their hulls scarred and patched, looking more like salvaged wrecks than proper starships, but there were so many of them. 47 ships might not sound like much compared to the Confederation's grand fleets, but these ships moved with a coordination that spoke of shared purpose. They didn't form neat battle lines like Centauri vessels or elegant formations like the Celestial Alliance. They spread out like a pack of predators, each ship finding its own angle of attack. The Void Reapers, for the first time in their recorded history, paused their bombardment. Their biomechanical ships turned toward the newcomers, sensor tendrils extending to analyze these unexpected arrivals. What they found defied their understanding. These ships were powered by barely contained fusion reactors, held together with metal alloys that should have been too primitive to achieve spaceflight. The life signs aboard them indicated a species that thrived in conditions that would kill most galactic citizens instantly. Captain Shun opened a channel to both the Corellians and the Void Reapers. Attention, Void Reaper Fleet. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. You are conducting hostile actions against a peaceful species. Cease your attack immediately or face the consequences. The Void Reapers' response was to fire their bioplasma weapons at the nearest human ship, a converted cargo hauler called the Stubborn Mule. The green energy beam should have vaporized the primitive vessel instantly. Instead, it struck ablative armor made from compressed asteroid material, spreading the energy across the hull in a spectacular but ultimately harmless light show. The Stubborn Mule's captain, a former asteroid miner named Marcus Webb, laughed. Over the comm channel. That tickled. Our turn now. What followed was not the elegant space ballet of traditional galactic warfare. The humans fought like they lived, with brutal efficiency, creative desperation, and absolute refusal to follow anyone else's rules. Mining ships fired repurposed drilling lasers that punched through bio-armor like paper. Colony ships launched. Prefabricated habitat modules filled with nuclear warheads. Science vessels used their enhanced sensors to find and target weak points with surgical precision. The Void Reapers, beings that had never encountered effective resistance, found themselves facing a species that treated warfare like a problem, to be solved with whatever tools were at hand. When bioplasma weapons proved ineffective, the Reapers tried to close for boarding actions. They discovered that humans had turned their own ships into weapons, deliberately ramming smaller Reaper vessels, while crew members in armored EVA suits boarded through the breaches. On Krelia, Theron watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded before his eyes. These humans, these Deathworlders from an impossible planet, were doing what the greatest military powers in the galaxy had declared impossible. They were winning. Asterisk. The unexpected saviors, the battle for Krelia, had entered its second hour, and the tide had definitively turned. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, coordinating the controlled chaos that humans called tactics. Where the Void Reapers expected disciplined formations and predictable strategies, they found human captains who had learned warfare from history's greatest improvisers. Marcus, swing around their flank with Group 3, Sarah commanded, watching the tactical display with intense focus. Jennifer, I need you to create a debris field at coordinates I'm sending now. Use those empty cargo containers. The human fleet moved like a living organism, each ship operating independently, yet somehow maintaining perfect coordination. It was a strategy born from Earth's own nature, individual adaptation serving collective survival. The Void Reapers, accustomed to enemies who fought with rigid doctrine, couldn't adapt fast enough to the constantly shifting human tactics. Lieutenant Commander Torres reported from his station, Captain, the colony ship New Horizon is requesting permission to deploy ground forces to Krelia's surface. They say they have medical teams ready. Sarah nodded. In the middle of a space battle, humans were already thinking about saving lives on the ground. It was this contradiction that the galaxy couldn't understand, a species capable of terrible violence, yet driven by an overwhelming need to protect the innocent. Permission granted. Tell them to coordinate with the Krelian Defense Forces. On Krelia's surface, Ambassador Theron received the communication with disbelief. They want to send medical teams? The battle is still raging above us. But the humans came anyway. Drop pods launched from the New Horizon, plummeting through the atmosphere while space battles raged overhead. Each pod contained medical supplies, emergency equipment, and humans trained in what they called combat medicine, the art of saving lives while everything tried to kill you. Dr. James Patterson was first out of his pod, immediately setting up a field hospital in the ruins of a Krelian cultural center. His team worked with brutal efficiency, treating injured Krelians whose biology they'd only studied in theory. When Krelian doctors protested that humans couldn't possibly understand their physiology, Patterson simply replied, "We'll figure it out as we go." "We usually do." The Krelian medic Cyril watched in amazement as human doctors performed procedures that seemed impossibly crude, yet remarkably effective. They used sonic scalers meant for geological surveys to seal wounds, repurposed mining, explosives as cauterization tools, and somehow managed to synthesize compatible blood substitutes using the ship's food processors. "How do you know this will work?" Cyril asked as Patterson successfully stabilized a critically injured Krelian child. "We don't," Patterson admitted, already moving to the next patient. "But doing something is better than doing nothing. That's the human way. Try everything until something works." Above them, the space battle had taken an unexpected turn. The Void Reapers, faced with continued human resistance, had begun to adapt their own tactics. Their bioships started merging together, forming larger, more powerful configurations. It was a strategy that had worked against the few species that had mounted serious resistance. Captain Shun watched the transformation with interest rather than fear. They're consolidating their forces, reducing their number of targets while increasing firepower. She turned to her weapons officer. Remember the Battle of Thermopylae? The weapons officer grinned. Funnel them into a kill zone? Exactly. Signal the fleet. Operation Hot Gates is a go. The human ships began what looked like a retreat, falling back toward Krelia's largest moon. The Void Reapers, sensing weakness, pursued in their newly merged configurations. They didn't realize until too late that the humans had turned the moon's gravity well into a weapon. Mining ships had spent the last hour planting charges across the moon's surface, while the retreating fleet led the Reapers into optimal position. When the charges detonated, they didn't destroy the moon. That would have been catastrophic for Krelia. Instead, they created a massive debris field of moon rock and ice, accelerated by the explosions into a cloud of kinetic projectiles. The human ships, prepared for this, took cover behind their ablative armor. The Void Reapers, their bioships designed to absorb energy weapons, were shredded by simple rocks moving at tremendous velocity. It was elegant in its crudeness, using the most basic law of physics. Mass times acceleration equals force to defeat an enemy that had mastered exotic energy manipulation. The galaxy's advanced civilizations would later study this battle in horror and fascination, unable to understand how a species could think of using a moon as ammunition. The Void Reaper fleet, reduced to less than a third of its original strength, began to emit a new frequency, something the galaxy had never recorded before. Commander Velix, monitoring from Krelia, gasped. Ambassador, they're requesting communication. The Void Reapers want to talk. It was unprecedented. The Void Reapers had never communicated beyond their initial attacks, but now, faced with humans who fought like demons and thought like chaos incarnate, they were trying to negotiate. The communication came through in multiple languages simultaneously, finally resolving into something the universal translators could process. Humans of Earth, we are the Void Reapers. We consume to survive. We expand to exist. Why do you defend these weak ones? They are not your kind. Captain Shun's response was broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring everyone in the system heard. You're right. They're not our kind. They're better than us in many ways, more peaceful, more civilized, more advanced. But here's what you don't understand about humans. We protect those who can't protect themselves, not because they're like us, but because it's right. She paused, letting her words sink in. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived by protecting each other, by deciding that every life has value. You want to know why we're defending Krelia? Because they asked for help, and we were able to give it. It's that simple. The Void Reapers were silent for a long moment. When they responded, there was something almost like confusion in their communication. You risk extinction for strangers. This is not logical. Logic? Captain Marcus Webb's voice cut into the channel from the stubborn mule. We're humans. We ate poison for flavor, domesticated wolves by making friends with them, and went to space, strapped to controlled explosions. Logic isn't exactly our strong suit, but protecting innocent people? That's something we're very, very good at. The remaining Void Reaper ships began to pull back, their biomechanical forms twisting in ways that suggested deep distress. They had encountered something beyond their understanding, a species that fought not for survival or conquest, but for principles. As they retreated toward the system's edge, their final communication was perhaps the most chilling. We will remember the humans of Earth. We will not return to spaces you protect. As the Void Reapers vanished into hyperspace, a strange silence fell over the Krelian system. The impossible had happened. A fleet of primitive ships crewed by Deathworlders had driven off the galaxy's greatest threat. The human ships hung in space, battered and damaged, but victorious, while on the surface below, human medical teams continued saving Krellian lives. With improvised equipment and sheer determination, Ambassador Theron stood in what remained of his command center, looking up at the human ships through the cracked, transparent dome. His bioluminescent patterns had shifted to something the Krellians hadn't displayed in generations. The deep purple of profound respect. "Open a channel to Captain Shun," he ordered. When the connection was established, he spoke words that would echo through galactic history. "Captain, I speak for all Krellia when I say we are forever in your debt. But I must ask, why? Why did you come when all others refused?" Sarah Chun's image appeared on the screen, her face tired but smiling. Behind her, her crew worked to repair battle damage with the same intensity they'd shown in combat. "Ambassador Theron, there's an old Earth saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good beings to do nothing. We could have done nothing. But that's not who we are." She paused, then added something that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity. "We're called Deathworlders because we come from a hostile planet. But we survived that hostile planet by refusing to become hostile ourselves. We learned that strength isn't about conquest, it's about lifting others up. Today, Krellia needed lifting. Tomorrow, someone else might need it. That's why we're out here." The conversation was being transmitted across the galactic communication. An ETWORKS. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 different languages, species were learning what humans really were. Not the primitive warmongers they'd assumed, but something far more dangerous to the established order, a species that believed everyone deserved protection. Within hours, distress calls that had gone unanswered for years were being responded to by human ships. Pirates that had operated with impunity found themselves facing crews that treated them like the bullies they were. Slavers discovered that humans had very strong opinions about freedom. The Galactic Confederation called emergency sessions, trying to understand how to deal with these chaotic newcomers who refused to follow the unwritten rules of civilized indifference. The Zentari Republic formally protested human intervention in local disputes. The Celestial Alliance expressed concern about the destabilizing influence of human military actions. Captain Shun received all these communications while overseeing repairs to her ship. She read them with amusement, then sent a single response to all concerned parties. "Humanity is here to help. Get used to it." On Krellia, as the days passed and reconstruction began, something beautiful emerged from the devastation. Human engineers worked alongside Krellian scientists, sharing knowledge and learning from each other. Human children from the colony ships played with Krellian younglings, their laughter echoing through rebuilt streets. The two species, so different in evolution and culture, found common ground in their shared values of compassion and curiosity. Dr. Patterson, who had spent sleepless nights learning Krellian physiology through trial and error, was awarded the highest medical honor Krellia could bestow. In his acceptance speech, delivered in badly pronounced but earnest Krellian, he said something that crystallized the human spirit. "We're not heroes. We're just people who saw other people in trouble. Where we come from, that's all the reason you need to help. The galaxy would never be the same. The Deathworlders had come, but not as conquerors or destroyers. They came as protectors, as healers, as friends to those who had none. They brought chaos to the ordered galaxy, but it was the chaos of compassion, the disruption of kindness. And in the depths of space, other threatened species began to transmit a new kind of message. Not distress calls to an indifferent galaxy, but messages of hope. Call the humans, they'll come." The age of humanity had begun, not with conquest or supremacy, but with a simple truth that they'd learned on their dangerous world. Sometimes The most powerful thing you can do is help someone who needs it, especially when everyone else has walked away. As Captain Shun looked out at the stars from her repaired bridge, she smiled at the thought of all the distress calls they'd answer, all the impossible fights they'd take on, all the lives they'd save. The galaxy thought humans were Deathworlders because they came from a hostile planet. They were about to learn that humans were Deathworlders because they brought death to those who preyed on the innocent, and life, hope, and protection to everyone else. The universe had just become a much more interesting place. Asterisk.